your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. Thanks for joining us for a look at what made headlines this past week. A state-of-the-art cancer center in Calgary will be welcoming new patients later this month. The Arthur J.E. Child Comprehensive Cancer Center will officially open on October 28th. Health officials say around 50% of Albertans will develop some form of cancer in their lifetime, with more than 23,300 new cases expected this year. Premier Danielle Smith says a facility such as this one in Calgary was sorely needed. She also says cancer patients had a lot of input into what is offered at the facility. Although many of us warn our children to avoid becoming victims of online child sexual exploitation and abuse, sadly, according to Stats Canada, many still fall victim to predators. Corporal Heather Bangle, who works with the Internet Child Exploitation Unit at Alert, explains what factors are influencing the continued growth of these heinous crimes.
More access to things online, both, for offenders and for the victims. When we talk about child sexual exploitation material, it can come from a variety of different sources, whether that be a child who's lured or sextorted online, or it could also be created and generated by someone actually sexually abusing the child and recording it and sharing that content online. If we're talking in terms of the luring and the sextortion, it can be any age, but primarily the sextortion is more teenage boys and girls from maybe ages 13 to 17. But we have had kids that have been lured online that are as young as 8 years old. Boys are sextorted for financial gain by the offender, and girls are sextorted for more images and videos. It can be from anywhere in the world. So the victim might be here in Canada, doesn't necessarily mean the offender is here in Canada. A lot of these sextortion cases that we're getting right now are originating out of West Africa. If something does happen online, tell someone, because you're not alone. It is happening so much.
According to Stats Canada, more than 68% of child pornography incidents involved making or distributing child porn, and about 32% of the cases involved possessing or accessing child pornography. Well, high summer temperatures and, above all, a lack of rain were the main challenges facing the 2024 harvest season in Alberta. David Bishop, Region 1 Director for Alberta Grains, explains which type of crops produced the best during this harvest.
The cereals did. They can handle the stress of the heat we had in July better than the oil seeds, which is the canola, and the pulses, which were the yellow peas. We just had a hot July, and we had a really, really good crop coming, looking like it probably would be a bumper crop, and then the heat in July kind of put it back down to more normal, to a more average crop. It was a good crop. I'm not going to say it wasn't a good crop. It was a good crop, but was it a bumper crop? No. It was probably closer to an average crop.
According to Alberta government stats, the province saw the most significant and persistent droughts during the 1920s and 1930s. With growth and expansion comes challenges. This is part of what the Holy Spirit Catholic School Division in Lethbridge is experiencing. The board announced earlier this week that they have more than 5,500 students enrolled, which is 4.35% increase compared to last year. But does the division have enough space to meet this need? The board chair explains what the biggest challenges are.
We're running out of space. We've run out of teachers. We need to hire more teachers, but with the particular current funding enrollment, their funding formula that our provincial government uses right now, we're always playing catch up. It's not possible to hire teachers when children enter our schools, but we're working with the provincial government on that. Now, within the next few years, we're going to open a new Catholic elementary school on the west side. But what we really need is a modernization of St. Francis Junior High School. We've been working very closely with our local MLA, Minister Newdorf, to push that as a priority of government, because we simply need the space. We have no more room to put children, but As a publicly funded Catholic institution, we accept all children and we continue to accept all children, but we need more room for them. Even something as simple as desks or tables and chairs for our children to sit at, we're running out of those as well.
When we return, Canada puts a group known for its pro-Palestinian rallies on the list of terrorist organizations. But first, a quick break. The federal government has now listed Samidoun as a terrorist group. They were behind many of the pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel rallies across the country, including the protest in Vancouver where "Death to Canada" was chanted. The designation means Canadians are banned from donating or providing property to the group. The U.S. has added a Canadian citizen affiliated with Samidoun to its counterterrorism list. Sun political columnist Brian Lilly says it's about time Samidoun received a terrorist designation from the Trudeau administration.
Hopefully, it means that we're going to see less of them at these public rallies. You're right, they have been front and center in Toronto, they're front and center in Vancouver. That whole "Death to Canada" chant, "Long live October 7th," that's all Samidoun. They've been part of the encampments. So being part of that organization now comes with a criminal charge. They won't be able to fundraise. Their ability to disseminate information will be curtailed in this country, and those are all good things.
Meanwhile, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre criticized the Prime Minister and his stance on the Houthi terrorist group. On the social media platform X, Poilievre says, quote, "Trudeau buckled under pressure from common-sense Conservative demands to ban the terrorist group Samidoun in Canada, but is still refusing to ban the Houthis from operating on Canadian soil. Hate crimes are up 251%, and violent crime is up 51% after 9 years of the NDP Liberals failing to protect our people," end quote. In other news, the Prime Minister says his government expelled 6 Indian diplomats linked to criminal activity after New Delhi refused to cooperate in investigations. He says Canada is still asking India to cooperate with RCMP probes into violent incidents and coercive behavior linked to agents of the Indian government.
As the RCMP Commissioner stated earlier, they have clear and compelling evidence that agents of the Government of India have engaged in and continue to engage in activities that pose a significant threat to public safety. This includes clandestine information gathering techniques, coercive behavior targeting South Asian Canadians, and involvement in over a dozen threatening and violent acts, including murder.
Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, meantime, says outside of expelling the Indian diplomats, the federal government must hold an emergency public safety committee meeting to discuss what else can be done to protect the lives of Canadians. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith spoke out against Ottawa's proposal to require Canada's oil and gas sector to cut greenhouse gas emissions. The proposal to slash them by 35 to 38% by 2030 from the 2019 levels. Smith says a production cap of that magnitude would severely hurt Alberta economically, restricting growth and hindering investment. She says it's time to scrap the cap.
Once again, Ottawa is attempting to set policies that are short-sighted and reckless. This fall, the federal government plans to table regulations that would set mandatory targets with irresponsible timeframes for upstream oil and gas and liquefied natural gas facilities. Ottawa says they're working to cut emissions, but we all know that's what they're really doing is cutting production of oil and gas. And this, by extension, will cut jobs and revenues across the country. And that should concern every Canadian. Alberta's oil and gas industry is a huge part of Canada's economy. It provides a stable energy supply for Canadians and also for people who live in countries and import our oil and gas products.
The Alberta government says the province has seen an influx of 518 physicians recently, which represents an increase of 4.5% compared to the same period last year. Officials say there are now 12,126 physicians registered in Alberta. Calgary has seen the largest increase of 370 doctors. Health Minister Adriana LaGrange says her government's priority is strengthening primary health care across the province, which is why they are setting up Primary Care Alberta. It will be led by Dr. Kim Simmons, who will act as a CEO.
Which means more Albertans will be attached to a primary care provider, which may be a family doctor or a nurse practitioner, but no one should be forced to seek primary health care in an emergency department or acute care setting. This work will include introducing new models of primary care, which means supporting the formation of teams of primary care professionals to work together and provide comprehensive health care to each Albertan. Primary Care Alberta will also work to increase access to after-hours care, including options for virtual and digital health where appropriate, because health issues don't just happen during business hours, and I think we all know that.
But the health minister's announcement was criticized by Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi and NDP nominee for Lethbridge West Rob Miyashiro. Nenshi also took issue with the UCP's recent ad campaign against the federal government's emissions cap and offered support to Miyashiro for the upcoming Lethbridge West by-election. BCN's Landon Hickok has the story.
Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi was in Lethbridge alongside Lethbridge's West NDP nominee Rob Miyashiro to address a number of issues, primarily in healthcare. Nenshi was critical of Health Minister Adriana LaGrange's morning announcement of Alberta's new primary care agency. He said the new announcement is like shuffling deck chairs on a sinking ship.
The announcement said nothing about getting more family doctors. It said nothing about paying family doctors reasonably. It said nothing about improving people's access to primary care. Instead, we have a new CEO and a whole set of new managers to develop a new system that still doesn't have any money and still doesn't have any people working in it.
Other reactions, such as the Alberta Medical Association, have a more moderate reaction to Tuesday's announcement. The primary care comprehensive model was tabled earlier this year, and the AMA have campaigned to get the provincial government to get it into action.
I mean, I think it's vital, and we've talked about this before, about the primary care is the foundation of a healthcare system, and we need to stabilize it and we need to build it. And, you know, part of that for us, or a huge part of that, is getting this PCCM model put into place so that we can stabilize and retain the physicians we already have. Then with this organization, hopefully we can build upon that. We can become a model across the country where family physicians want to come and work. So that would be aspirational, and we'll see if we can get there.
The recent news of 2 Lethbridge physicians leaving the province brought alarm to the residents in the city, including one resident who now has to travel nearly an hour to Milk River for her family to get any health care.
I definitely can't blame our doctor for leaving. People need to work in supportive places, and I just can't see why a family physician would stay here and practice in Alberta when there's other provinces that they could practice in. I would say, though, that my family and many families are more vulnerable, and our children are more vulnerable because of this, and I would like to see something change.
And I have some news for the UCP because they don't seem to get it. It's impossible to find a family doctor in our community. But don't just ask me. Check the primary care network's Find a Doctor tool. Well, you find a doctor in Lethbridge and there's nothing that comes up.
Tuesday morning, the UCP government launched a major ad campaign to voice against the federal government's emissions cap on oil and gas. Nenshi also criticized the campaign, citing it is heavily funded by taxpayer dollars.
This is typical Danielle Smith and UCP. They're spending a whole bunch of taxpayers' money in places like Halifax to try and influence the upcoming federal election instead of actually solving the problem.
For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
The full statements from Nenshi and Miyashiro are available on our website and the Bridge City News YouTube channel. The court case has begun involving an Alberta woman who is suing both the provincial and federal governments over injuries she says she sustained because of receiving the COVID-19 vaccines. Carrie Sakamoto from Lethbridge claims she now has Bell's palsy resulting from 2 shots of mRNA vaccines. One of her lawyers is Jeff Rath from Rath & Company, who joined Hal Roberts from Calgary to chat more about this case.
Jeff, you say it's pretty important that Carrie and other Canadians who've been injured as a result of the vaccine be fairly compensated?
Absolutely. It's in Carrie's case, she has a recognized vaccine injury. And of course, her entire life has been destroyed by as a result of, and I don't even like calling them vaccines, these experimental injections. She can no longer function at any level that she could previously to getting the shot. They've lost their family farm. They've been forced to move into town. The quality of life that they now enjoy as a family is so far degraded as to be unrecognizable from what their lives were like prior to, Carrie being conned into taking these dangerous shots by Dina Hinshaw and the provincial government and federal government, that it's beyond belief.
So what message are you really trying to convey with this court case?
What we're trying to convey is that there needs to be accountability amongst the provincial and federal governments that literally lied to the citizens of Canada, repeatedly saying that these vaccines were quote unquote safe and effective, when they knew from the data they received from Pfizer and the other companies themselves that these shots were not safe and not effective. I mean, Pfizer's data indicated, with the childhood vaccines as an example, that if a kid were to get vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine, that they were more likely to die from myocarditis than they were to die from COVID following a Pfizer shot. So it's important for people to recognize that, they've been sold a bill of goods by, with regard to these vaccines, that there are, these shots. The long and the short of it is that the data, now demonstrates that the more shots you get, the poorer your health outcomes are.
Now, Jeff, didn't those who were injured by the vaccine already receive some form of compensation by the federal government?
The compensation program is a complete joke. It's more money is going to the Trudeau's pals that are running the program that are given to the victims. In Carrie's case, the paltry sums that she's been given through the vaccine injury program, no way compensate her family for the manner in which their lives have been destroyed by these experimental shots. So that's the problem, is that the compensation that's available in no way matches the amount of injury that's been caused. And look at people that have myocarditis. Like we have one of our clients, has had 10 years scrubbed off of his life as a result of sustaining both myocarditis and vasculitis, from these shots. Like, how do you compensate, somebody for that? The vaccine injury program doesn't even come close to it.
Thanks so much for your time today, Jeff. That was Jeff Rath with Rath & Company. He's one of the lawyers representing Carrie Sakamoto, who is suing following injuries she says she sustained after receiving the mRNA vaccines.
Alberta's United Conservative Party will be holding its annual general meeting November 1st and 2nd in Red Deer. Just over 5,400 members are registered to attend. They will be debating 35 party resolutions, but according to legislative reporter Tyler Dawson, there are also some unusual policy ideas that will not be discussed. Here is Tyler Dawson and BCN's Hal Roberts.
So the way the whole system works is various constituency associations make policy proposals, and then a document went out to the party membership back in early September, and members could sort of rank or vote on what they felt were the most important policy proposals, and those are the ones that we now see in this 35 strong list. So some of those original ones are, were just sort of unusual. One of them that really caught my eye, for example, was the idea of bringing in strong mayor legislation in Alberta. Now, this has already happened in Ontario, and it basically means that a mayor is a little bit more than just one vote on council. They have some budget making responsibilities. They have some veto powers. And there was the proposal that the UCP should consider that as government policy. That did not make the cut. There were some suggestions that there should be funding restrictions on sort of late-term abortions. That didn't make the cut either. So really what you have here is this sort of final list, and a good chunk of it is very much bread and butter conservative politics, opposition to the carbon tax. I think nobody's surprised that the UCP is going to be debating their opposition to the carbon tax, although I can't imagine there's going to be people on the yes and the no side of that one. And then there's also a whole bunch of sort of social and cultural issues, restrictions around, as you mentioned, where transgender people can use change rooms or washrooms, for example. The other one you mentioned was to only have 2 genders on official government documents. This would actually reverse a policy change made by Rachel Notley's NDP in 2018. So really what you have here is some bread and butter conservative issues and a bunch of sort of social cultural issues that are certainly very exciting for the UCP base. In the broader context, though, I think there's a lot of concern in Alberta right now about cost of living, the state of healthcare. So you have to wonder if the policy proposals that are going to be debated, if these are really the things that Albertans are, particularly concerned about at the moment. So that's something that I think is going to be quite interesting going forward.
Now, during this convention, Daniel Smith will also be facing a leadership review. Now, normally a leader doesn't face a review after winning an election, but this is kind of an unusual quirk the party's put in place.
Yeah, so all this stuff's sort of governed by party bylaws, and one of those rules is that every 3rd convention, or once every 3 years, there needs to be a leadership review, sort of regardless of anything else that's been going on. And Smith didn't have one for the last couple of years. Obviously, the first year she'd just become party leader. Last year she'd just won an election. So this year is sort of by the rules that the party has. This has got to be the year that they do it. But it is unusual. You don't generally win a minority government and then have your party members going, well, I don't really know about this Danielle Smith character. She only led us to a majority government. It's very strange. And it really, some of the criticism of it from within the party is that this is really an unstable way to do things. The leader needs to worry about this leadership review when there's other things that maybe should be occupying her time. There's the argument that this is sort of forcing a focus on some of these less mainstream ideas because there's people in the party who are particularly animated and concerned about these things. So the basic idea is that, does this really derail the party's sort of overall objectives? And there's been some talk about saying, maybe we should stop this. Now, that would require, changes to the bylaws and all that, but it is an unusual situation. And I don't think anyone expects Danielle Smith to lose during that vote, but certainly puts her in a bit of an odd spot coming into this convention.
Now, beginning next month, our province will be launching a new health agency called Primary Care Alberta. Officials say it'll be focused on getting more doctors into the province, which we need, and promoting more connectivity between various primary care professions. And unsurprisingly, Tyler, the NDP slammed the idea.
Yeah, Ned Nenshi basically saying this is, shuffling the deck chairs on a sinking ship. Obviously, healthcare is one of those things that the NDP really likes talking about it because it's a good issue for them. And I think it's also very much a large concern for Albertans right now. And so this is part of that much larger overhaul of Alberta healthcare that the UCP has proposed to sort of have 4 pillars looking at, or managing, I should say, different aspects of the healthcare system. The first one already launched, that's Recovery Alberta, which is sort of the mental health and addiction side of the operation. And as the name suggests, Primary Care Alberta, this is much more on the primary care front. So I think there's some big questions that remain here, whether or not creating these 4 pillars is going to improve efficiency and communication across these pillars, or whether or not having them hyper focused on a specific thing, which is what the government is saying, is going to improve healthcare outcomes. Maybe a bit early to tell. Although there were some numbers out just the other day that I think Alberta got about 500 new doctors in the last quarter or so. But this is top of mind, I think, for a lot of Albertans, and the UCP is trying to do something on it.
The Alberta government is threatening to launch another lawsuit against Bill C-69, otherwise known as the No More Pipelines Bill. Tyler, didn't our province already win a legal challenge at the Supreme Court against that legislation?
Yes, indeed. Back in 2023, the Supreme Court sided with Alberta on parts of Bill C-69, not the whole thing. The whole thing was not found unconstitutional, but big chunks of it were. And so usually what happens when legislation is found unconstitutional, it goes back to the parliament or the legislature, and they sort of craft new legislation to sort of fit into fit around the constitutional guidelines, I guess, that the courts have given. So that's what's happened here. And Alberta is obviously not happy with the changes that the Liberals in Ottawa have made to that legislation. So there is a threat of another lawsuit. I think Danielle Smith gave them November 1st or 2nd sort of as a deadline to do that before a lawsuit is launched. Obviously, that's not going to happen. Obviously, the Liberals are not going to completely rewrite this legislation just because Premier Smith is upset about it. So there could be another, perhaps almost certainly will be another legal challenge here. And then, of course, time will tell whether or not this challenge is as successful as the one before, which, Alberta has a mixed record on this, right? We lost on the carbon tax, won on Bill C-69. So if the province takes another crack at it, who knows what that outcome could be.
We're just barely into autumn, so it's hard to even think about Christmas right now. But the holiday season is getting closer, and that means it's time to wrap up those shoe boxes with goodies to send overseas, because Operation Christmas Child is about to begin once again. The initiative, led by Samaritan's Purse, helps to provide toys and school supplies for children in need around the world. Frank King is the News Media Relations Manager of Samaritan's Purse Canada. He joined us from Calgary to discuss the initiative. Take a look.
So what are some of the more important items children need this time around, Frank?
Definitely the thing that my wife and I try to get in all our shoe boxes is school supplies. I'm thinking, pencils, paper, erasers, that sort of thing. Because in some countries where the education system is free, the children still need to supply all their own writing materials and pencils and papers and all that. That alone means some children will not get to go to school, will not get to get an education, and will not have an important cog in what it takes to break out of the cycle of poverty that traps so many families in the developing world. So when my wife and I pack our shoe boxes, we always make sure we have school supplies in there. That's a big key one for us.
That's awesome. So Frank, if folks want to learn more about Operation Christmas Child and the Shoebox campaign, where should they go?
The easiest place to go is SamaritansPurse.ca. We've already got sort of our homepage on the website sort of littered with Operation Christmas Child stuff. I should mention too that if some of your viewers are living in areas where there are no drop-off locations, the easiest thing to do is go to packabox.ca and you can pack your shoe boxes online. In the last few years, my wife and I have done it this way. It's so handy, it's so convenient. And what happens then is in the new year, we get a whole bunch of volunteers at our Calgary Processing Center. And what we do is we physically pack the shoe boxes that people have done online, and then off they go to countries in Central America and Philippines and Ukraine and French-speaking West Africa.
That's wonderful. Thanks for your time today, Frank. That was Frank King, News Media Relations Manager from Samaritan's Purse, joining us from Calgary.
The demand for hydrogen in the world is growing, but it turns out Alberta is a global leader in hydrogen production. So what does this mean for the economy? Well, that's next.
We're really excited about its potential. We're working through some of the cost implications and transportation challenges, but it is a growing industry expected to be over $11 trillion worldwide.